Welcome back to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love series, episode 23.
23 already. Wow, time flies.
I know, right? It feels like just yesterday we were starting this.
Yeah.
So today we're diving deep into a case from Mumbai, India.
Okay.
A story that really shook the Mira Road suburb back in 2017.
Oh, yeah.
It's a reminder that love and obsession, they can be so closely intertwined.
Yeah.
And sometimes lead to really devastating consequences.
Absolutely. And these cases, where love takes such a dark turn, they really force us to examine the complexities of human relationships,
Right, because on the surface we have these two seemingly ordinary individuals.
Right.
Rashmi Patel, hardworking software engineer,
Okay.
and her live-in partner, Kunal Mehra, a fitness trainer. But as we dig deeper, we're going to see how this seemingly ordinary couple becomes entangled in this web of possessiveness,
Yeah.
control, and ultimately tragedy.
It's so interesting how these cases often begin with such a stark contrast between the individuals involved.
Yeah, totally. Like in this case, you have Rashmi described as this dedicated, friendly person with a really bright future ahead of her.
Right.
And then you have Kunal, charming and ambitious on the one hand, but with these whispers of a quick temper and a possessive streak on the other.
It's like that initial attraction or even excitement can mask deeper issues,
Yeah.
Especially when one person's need for control clashes with the other's desire for independence.
Absolutely. And it seems like that's exactly what happened with Rashmi and Kunal.
Oh, really?
Their whirlwind romance. They kind of quickly gave way to constant arguments and this undercurrent of emotional manipulation.
Wow.
And I mean, just think about it. Rashmi is financially independent, successful in her career, working long hours at this big tech company.
Yeah,
That kind of independence can be so threatening to someone who thrives on control.
for sure.
And it seems like Kunal really struggled with that.
It often manifests as coercive control.
Right.
So the abuser starts to isolate their partner,
Yeah.
really chipping away at their self-esteem, making them more and more dependent.
It's insidious.
It is. It's subtle and insidious, and it can be hard to recognize from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like a slow poisoning of the relationship. And we see those signs here,
Oh, really?
The sources mention friends recalling these frequent fights,
Wow.
escalating to verbal abuse.
Yeah.
Rashmi even confided in some friends, telling them that she felt trapped,
Oh, no.
desperate to get out of the relationship.
No.
She'd even started looking for a new apartment, which you would think would be a positive step.
Right, of course.
Right.
But that step toward independence
Right.
can actually be the most dangerous time for someone in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Because to the abuser, it's this huge loss of control.
For sure.
It can trigger this level of rage and desperation that can have terrifying consequences.
And sadly, that's exactly what happened on the night of July 18th, 2017.
Wow.
It started like so many other nights for this couple, with neighbors hearing the familiar sounds of an argument coming from their apartment. But this time,
Yeah.
those arguments ended in absolute tragedy.
It's heartbreaking that in many domestic violence cases, these warning signs, the escalating arguments, become almost commonplace.
It's true.
And people in the community, even those who care, they can become desensitized to it,
Right.
not realizing how close the situation is to boiling over,
Completely.
and then it's too late.
Yeah. And in this case, it went way too far.
Yeah.
That night, in a fit of rage, Kunal strangled Rashmi, murdering her right there in their living room.
Oh, my goodness.
But what happened next is what truly sent chills down my spine when I was reading through this case.
Really?
Like-
I'm ready.
Okay.
Tell me.
So after the murder, Kunal didn't just panic. He didn't flee.
Wow.
He did something much more calculated,
Okay.
something that speaks to a completely different level of premeditation.
Okay. I'm listening.
Get ready for this because this part is tough. Kunal actually attempted to dismember Rashmi's body,
Oh, my.
packing her remains into garbage bags.
That is just.
It's a level of brutality that's just hard to fathom.
Yeah.
And the fact that he planned to dispose of her body in this way, even after the murder,
Right.
shows how calculated his actions were.
That detail completely changes our understanding of this case.
Right.
It wasn't simply a crime of passion, a momentary loss of control.
Right, yeah.
This was a deliberate attempt to conceal his actions, to erase what he had done.
Exactly.
It raises so many questions about his state of mind, the level of premeditation involved, and whether this level of brutality was always simmering beneath the surface.
Completely. And thankfully, his plan didn't work.
Oh, thank goodness.
Some observant neighbors noticed an unusual smell coming from the apartment and immediately alerted the police.
Wow, good for them.
And that ultimately is what led to Kunal's downfall.
It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest details, something as simple as a smell, can be the key to cracking open a case.
That's so true.
And in this instance, it was the neighbors' vigilance, their willingness to report something that seemed off, that brought justice for Rashmi.
And when the Mira Road police arrived on July 20th,
Okay.
what they found inside that apartment was absolutely horrific.
Oh, gosh.
The dismembered remains of Rashmi packed into those garbage bags,
Oh, my.
and Kunal still at the scene.
He was just there.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was immediately arrested.
Jeez.
And what's truly unsettling is how sources describe his demeanor during the confession.
Oh, really?
So instead of the expected remorse, the panic, the breakdown,
Yeah.
Kunal was surprisingly calm,
What?
almost detached.
Wow.
He confessed to the crime matter-of-factly,
Yeah, way.
as if he were recounting something mundane.
And that kind of emotional disconnect,
Yeah.
especially after such a brutal act, can be a sign of something much darker at play.
It makes you wonder if this coldness, this lack of remorse was always there, hidden beneath that initial charm.
It's certainly a possibility, and it's this unsettling aspect of the case, the psychological puzzle it presents, that we'll delve into further in the next part of our deep dive.
For sure.
We'll explore the trial, the arguments presented, and try to understand the mind of someone capable of such a horrific act.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Welcome back.
So as we delve deeper into the Mira Road murder, I think it's really crucial for us to kind of shift our focus from the specifics of the case to this larger context in which this tragedy unfolded.
Yeah.
Because sadly, this story isn't just about these two individuals.
Right.
It reflects much larger societal issues that contribute to violence.
For sure.
And particularly violence against women.
Absolutely. In this case, it really forces us to confront that uncomfortable truth about intimate partner violence.
Right.
It's not something that just happens in isolation. It's a pattern, that repeats itself across cultures and societies.
It's true. And while this case occurred in Mumbai, the underlying issues, the power dynamics, the societal norms that contribute to such violence, I mean, those are things we see everywhere.
Exactly. So what are some of those societal factors that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, what are some of those things? What creates this environment where something like this can happen?
Well, one of the most significant factors is the persistence of these traditional gender roles and expectations.
Right.
In many cultures, men are still raised with this sense of entitlement, this belief that they have a right to control their partners, their decisions, their very lives.
And on the flip side, women are often socialized to be submissive,
Totally.
to prioritize their partner's needs above their own, to tolerate behavior that they really shouldn't.
And it creates this really dangerous imbalance of power where, control, jealousy, and possessiveness can be mistaken for love.
Totally. And that can make it so difficult for someone in an abusive relationship to recognize those danger signs or to assert their own independence.
Especially when you factor in things like financial dependence or social isolation, which we often see in these cases.
Totally. It's like the abuser creates this web that's almost impossible for the victim to escape.
It is, and that's why it's so critical to talk about these issues openly, Challenge those harmful societal norms, create a culture where healthy relationships are not the exception but the rule.
And we need to empower individuals to recognize those red flags
for sure
early on and to understand that they have the right to safety, respect, and autonomy in their relationships.
It's about teaching young boys and girls what healthy relationships look like.
Totally.
About respect, consent, communication. It's about empowering women to value their independence, their self-worth, and their right to a life free from fear.
It's a multifaceted issue.
It is.
That requires this multi-pronged approach.
For sure.
We need education, awareness campaigns, strong support systems for those who are experiencing abuse. But we also need to hold abusers accountable for their actions.
Absolutely.
To send a clear message that violence is never acceptable.
100%. As we're talking about these societal factors, there's one question that keeps coming to mind about this case.
Okay, what is it?
Where was the community?
Oh, that's a good question.
Why didn't anyone intervened sooner?
Yeah.
I mean, the neighbors clearly heard those arguments.
Right.
They knew something wasn't right.
It speaks to the complex dynamics of domestic violence.
Yeah.
You know, it's not always easy to recognize the signs of abuse.
Right.
And even when people do, they may hesitate to get involved.
Yeah.
There's often this fear of making things worse.
Right.
Or of putting the victim at even greater risk.
And there's this societal tendency to view domestic violence as like a private matter.
Something that should be dealt with within the family.
Right.
Which, of course, is incredibly dangerous.
For sure.
And just perpetuates the cycle of abuse.
Exactly. We need to shift that mindset.
Yeah.
You know, we need to create a culture where people feel empowered to speak up,
right.
to intervene, to offer support,
yeah.
to let victims know that they're not alone,
right.
that there's help available.
Because silence in these situations can be deadly.
It can.
It's like that saying,
yeah.
if you see something, say something.
Right.
But in this context, it takes on this whole new level of urgency.
Yeah.
Because we're not just talking about reporting a crime. We're talking about potentially saving a life.
And if you're out there listening and you're in an abusive relationship, please know that you are not alone.
Right.
And there are resources available to help you. There are hotlines, shelters, support groups that can provide a safe space to talk, to plan, to escape the abuse.
You deserve to be treated with respect.
You do.
With dignity, with love. No one has the right to control you.
Right.
Or to harm you, physically or emotionally.
Absolutely.
So you have the strength to break free from this cycle of abuse.
Seeking help is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's a sign of strength.
For sure.
Of courage.
Yes.
Of taking control of your own life.
Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And try to, get inside the mind of the abuser.
Interesting. Okay.
We're going to explore the psychological factors that might contribute to these types of crimes. What makes someone capable of such brutality, such calculated violence.
Yeah.
Especially towards someone they supposedly loved.
It's a dark and complex question.
It is.
But one that I think is essential to try to understand.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've examined the tragic details of the Mira Road murder.
Yeah.
We've explored the societal forces at play.
Right.
And now we find ourselves at the edge of this really unsettling question.
Yeah, a question that frankly has haunted humanity for centuries.
What is it?
What creates a monster?
Yeah.
What twists the human mind to the point where violence, even murder, becomes not just possible, but a choice?
Because while we can discuss these societal pressures, cultural norms, none of that fully explains why one person lashes out with such brutality while another, in similar circumstances, finds a different path.
Precisely. Which is why we have to kind of delve into the psychology of the abuser.
Right.
And while there's no easy answer, no singular profile that fits every case,
of course,
there are some recurring patterns, some red flags in thought and behavior that can give us disturbing insights.
So where do we even begin to unpack something as complex as, the psychology of an abuser?
Right.
What are some of those telltale signs that might indicate a potential for this kind of darkness?
One of the most consistent factors, and this was definitely present in Kunal's case, is a profound sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
These individuals truly believe they have a right to control their partners, their choices, their time, their emotions.
Right.
It goes far beyond mere jealousy. It's like this deep-seated ownership mentality.
So they're not seeing their partner as an individual with their own needs and desires, but almost as an extension of themselves.
Exactly, like a possession.
Yeah.
And hand in hand with that entitlement, often comes this distinct lack of empathy.
Wow.
They simply cannot grasp the pain they inflict, both emotional and physical.
Right.
It's chilling, but it explains why someone like Kunal could commit such a brutal act and then appear so calm, so detached when confronted with its consequences.
Which makes you wonder if that coldness was always there. Lurking beneath the surface. Or if it emerged as a kind of defense mechanism after the crime.
That's the heart of the psychological mystery, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's why cases like this are so disturbing.
For sure.
Because they force us to acknowledge that evil, or at least the capacity for it, isn't always so obvious. It can hide behind charisma, charm, even what appears to be love, until it explodes with devastating force.
And speaking of explosions, another common factor in abuser psychology
what's that?
is this inability to regulate their emotion.
Right.
They're prone prone to these sudden rages, impulsive actions, and often blame others for their own volatile feelings.
Think back to the events leading up to Rashmi's murder.
Right.
It seems clear that her decision to leave to assert her independence was perceived by Kunal not just as rejection, but as a profound personal attack. A loss of control he simply couldn't handle.
So in a twisted way, his rage, his violence, was almost a desperate attempt to regain that control. Even if it meant destroying the very person he claimed to love.
It's a tragic paradox, isn't it?
It is.
And sadly, it's one that plays out all too often in these cases of intimate partner violence.
But this case, with its level of brutality, the calculated attempt to cover up the crime, makes you wonder if there wasn't something even darker at play. Something beyond just possessiveness and rage.
You're right to raise that point, because in certain cases, particularly those involving extreme violence or a disturbing lack of remorse, we do have to consider the possibility of more severe personality disorders, such as psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder.
Those are some heavy-duty psychological terms.
They are.
What do they actually mean in a practical sense? How would those disorders manifest in someone like Kunal?
Well, individuals with these disorders often display this chilling combination of traits.
Like what?
A complete lack of remorse or guilt, a disregard for social norms and the rights of others, a tendency to manipulate and exploit, and often a superficial charm that masks their true nature.
So Kunal's seemingly calm demeanor after the murder, his lack of visible remorse, could those be indicators of like a deeper psychological disturbance?
It's certainly possible, but it's crucial to remember that we're not making a diagnosis here.
Of course.
That requires a professional evaluation. What we're doing is highlighting the potential for these darker psychological currents to be present in cases like this.
Which I think is incredibly important because the more we understand about the psychology of abusers, the better equipped we are to recognize those warning signs and hopefully prevent these tragedies from happening in the first place.
Exactly. Early intervention is key. And it starts with awareness. With having open conversations about mental health. With challenging those societal norms that enable abusive behavior. And with providing support systems for both victims and those struggling with their own anger and control issues.
It's about creating a culture where seeking help is seen not as a weakness, but as a sign of strength, a commitment to breaking the cycle of violence before it claims another life.
And if you're out there listening and you're in a relationship where you feel controlled, manipulated, or afraid, please know that you are not alone. There are resources available to help you find safety and support.
Absolutely.
You deserve to be treated with respect, with kindness and love.
This deep dive into the Mira Road murder has been a difficult journey.
It has.
Filled with unsettling details and tough questions.
It's a journey we need to take, though. If we want to understand the complexities of intimate partner violence and work toward a future where such tragedies become less frequent.
If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out.
Yes, please do.
There are resources listed in the episode description.
Absolutely.
And as always, thank you for listening to CrimePod Castle.
We'll see you next time.
Don't forget to follow and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of true crime.